Welcome, 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 everyone, to the Women's Empower Network. I am so excited to have Karen here with us today. Welcome, Karen.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm excited to get to know you a little better, and I'm sure everybody in the group is too. So, if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about your story and journey that led you to what you're passionate about today.
Sure. So I'm a psychotherapist. I'm here in Toronto, Canada. I've been in the field 40 years. I've been running my private practice, which is now known as KG and Associate, since 98. And I've been refining my programs and approaches over those years. And then I reached a point probably about 5 years ago that I honestly felt compelled to put it into a book. Not just my own story, but share the work that I was doing with clients that I knew were so effective and making such a big difference. I just felt there was a broader audience. So that's honestly what I did. I about 3 years ago, then started writing and editing the book. And we just launched it in February, actually at the Oscars in Los Angeles.
Oh, how exciting! And can you show us a picture of your book
Sure.
there?
So so it's yellow paint, learning to live again with the paint scroll there, the messy handle. So that was an intentional choice of the title and the image to be bold, to having something yellow coming out of the darkness. The yellow paint is actually a literal meaning for me when I hit rock bottom in my life many years ago. And somebody showed up to paint a room in my house yellow, and it was the interruption I needed to wake up. For the reader, it's a metaphorical image of the idea that we get invitations to grow, that whatever we've been in our life, whatever challenges and issues and wounds that we're carrying, the themes of those wounds will continue to appear in our life until we wake up. And so, more than anything, it's about the message of like, where are you at in that journey? What is the patterns that you keep coming up against? And what are you going to do about it?
That's beautiful. So, do you use, and you said you were a psychotherapist?
I am, yes.
So you still work with clients in the same way that you have been all those years?
I do. I created something, and we're just in the process of trademarking it, KG Accountable Therapy. And that name really captures the meaning of the work that I do. It's probably part of my own personality, definitely a part of my own personal growth, but also what I know about the human condition. Because by the time people come to my door, it's been years in the making. Whatever the crisis, usually it's a bigger crisis that they're facing at that moment, but it has a long history to it. So people hire me because they want change. But I knew the human condition. We want change, need change, and then turn around and get in our own way of the very change we're looking for. And that's why we keep, having repeated patterns. So honestly, my passion in my life has been to not just have safe, non-judgmental, meaningful therapeutic conversations, but to make sure that those conversations land somewhere. So what I'll often say to clients is be sure when you wake up tomorrow morning, you know what you're trying to do differently. Because we just so easily revert back to the familiar, even when it's not working for us. And then we get in our own way. So the accountability was for me to my clients to make sure that I was listening carefully so that I could understand the key formulation and explanation of how they got to where they did, and make sure also that I'm accountable to customizing all of the methods to make sure they make a difference. The client shows up with accountability so they own their journey, not out of shame or blame, but to understand as an imperfect human how they're getting in their own way as well, and to practice the things that we're doing. I believe strongly in daily brain health exercises. I don't ask clients to do hours and hours a day. We don't usually don't have that time, and then we feel bad if we don't do it.
Right.
5 minutes, 2 minutes. These are the length of time the daily brain exercises take. So we dedicate to doing something very specific every day to get out of our own way.
That's beautiful. Yeah, the term I use is looping. You know, we keep doing it again and again, but and then we find ourselves in this situation, but we really don't have awareness as to, well, darn it, I did it again. How did I end up here again?
Right, right. In the book, I call it the invitations to grow. So I share part of my own story because, like everybody else, yes, I was like, oh my gosh, I did it again. And then we're almost like confused or surprised that it happened again, you know? So the invitations to grow, I share my own and all my journey through usually issues around control or worthiness, and they show up, different content, different people, different situations, but same purpose, same meaning. And so that's what we need to illuminate, because obviously we can't change what we don't recognize.
Right? And seems like 50% of it, isn't it?
It
To just
is. Yeah, like knowledge is power. And I want to create, what Oprah used to call aha moments, right?
yeah.
Because once we recognize what those invitations share, what they have in common and where it comes from, right? That is half the battle because otherwise, we're in that fog and we so easily keep going in circles. And generally, and what I share in the book is that generally those invitations get more serious and get worse, whether it's our health, our careers, our relationships, generally, I always say to people, don't worry if you don't get it this time, because there's something else coming down the road that'll be, a better chance to wake up, So more than anything, yeah, half the battle is that wake up of that aha moment of like, this is why this keeps happening.
No, it takes me back. I remember a very specific moment in time in a situation where there was a person who didn't value me, and there was a connection, but they didn't value me as a person. And I remember thinking to myself, I'd rather be by myself than to not be valued in this relationship. And then, needless to say, from that decision and finally making that declaration, I met my late husband, who became my best friend and a great guy. So
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
there's that moment you have that option of, oh, do I do it again or do I just say no?
Yeah, one of the best chances we get to wake up is in our romantic relationships where it's so vulnerable. And, obviously, who we choose and who we attract into our life has a very specific meaning and how it plays out. And if we show up in our best version of self and kind of invite a healthier relationship, but the other person isn't available to us, right, then the heartbreak is huge. There's a chapter in the book I call Pickleman and Authors from a film in the 1980s called Crossing Delancey. I was just filming about this yesterday because obviously a lot of us can grow through our romantic relationship. So I had to include that in the book, share a little bit about how I kept, dating authors. So people that are more narcissistic and don't value us. In the movie, Amy Irving is like chasing this, charming author while resisting this authentic love of Gus the Pickleman. But it was a great mantra we would use in the 80s with friends, but I used that to launch that chapter because that is one of the best ways we can wake up. And I went through my own divorce years ago. I learned a lot from that, not just in terms of my own journey, but how I could be effective for couples who were on the brink of separation or divorce, or what to do afterwards and how we can still grow after the divorce or after the relationship ends. So it's one of the most intimate parts of our life. So, of course, however we're living from our wounded or our healthy self, that's what's going to show up. And usually there's an opportunity there to grow.
Either way, I love that too. Because you can grow within the existing relationship, but I would imagine it takes both of you.
It does. One of the KG accountable therapy methods, I created a two-part program for couples. And it can include other elements, but the core program is two parts. Years ago, I had this brainwave and thought, what if I was doing with my couples what I've been doing with my individuals all along? because old school couple therapists, we jump right into communication or intimacy, but it wasn't working, trying to help couples communicate better or to get into deeper stages of love. So, part one of the program is a couple cognitive behavioral therapy program. And it was a game changer because that way I could help each partner show up for the conflict or the communication or the conversation they needed to have without being so triggered. Because honestly, all it takes is one partner to be triggered, whether they're a fighter or a flighter, and the communication breaks down. So I always say to people, it's like we're trying to frost a burnt cake, you know? So the CBT pathway for couples, it gets partners using the same language to help each other when they're triggered to come back to a conversation. And then part two of the tool was the actual conversation to have. But it capitalizes on the fact that we're not in a triggered state anymore. And a lot can happen. Couples are always surprised. I did this with a couple 2 days ago. They're on the verge of separating. And when we flip it on its back and say, okay, let's help you reduce your trigger reaction this way and for the other partner as well. Okay, let's walk through that part. Now let's walk through the steps, and it's a step-by-step process for the conversation to have. And couples will always say to me, but what if we end up like we know we're obviously disagreeing about this. We're like, what happens if we both want something different at the end of this conversation? And I'll say, trust me, there's something almost magical that happens when we're no longer triggered, but we're empowered. We can actually, explain how we're feeling about something. We can validate each other. I can show you empathy. And I can tell you where this might be coming from for me in a deeper way and what I need. And like probably I could count on one hand the amount of times over those years, 30 years, where couples still ended up in a black white place because oftentimes through that process, they usually realize they don't want much differently from each other, but they have key things that can help each other. And it's a game changer. It's one of my favorite parts of the work. And the accountable therapy method is when I give couples a different view of their problem and when they stop triggering each other and instead grow. And this is where the invitations of growth come because then when I grow through that conversation and my partner's there, it just is so meaningful. I end up falling in love deeper with them and with myself, and everybody wins.
That's so beautiful. I remember coming to that um, place and time in my own relationship with my late husband where he would do something, and the act of him just doing this one thing would push my buttons. And then I would
Right,
get upset and I would catch myself. I'm like, why am I getting so upset? He is free to react however he wants to. But I realized it took me, I had an expectation. I had a father who was very placid, and my husband was very expressive with emotion. And so I would get upset when he wouldn't behave like my father, but I didn't know that on a conscious level. And as soon as I noticed that and that it had nothing to do with him, it was
right.
like I got him off the hook. And it also helped me stop overreacting to what I perceived to him to be overreacting.
Right. That's right. Because as long as we're in that triggered reaction, we will take things personally, and either shame ourselves or blame the other person. I carried wounds of control and worthiness mostly from having pretty strict parents. They loved us, but they were pretty strict. And I had two older brothers who were
Oh,
close in age,
geez.
right? So I was like the third wheel. So I felt like powerless and unworthy because I had like wrongly internalized that there must be something wrong with me that they don't want to play with me, right? As silly as
Right.
that sounds. And then this is just how it works. We carry this unconsciously, right? So even in friendships, if there was like three friends and the other two knew each other better, I felt like the third wheel. I could easily, like, I would ride the more aggressive side of the wound and fight too hard or take things too personally. And then I'd be, confused as to why I wasn't hanging out with those friends anymore. So you reenact it, right? But through the recovery, and there is a chapter about friendship tribe as well. Once I could depersonalize that my brothers actually weren't out to get me, that they were closer in age, they were same gender back in the 70s, that meant more, that it had nothing to do with me. And the freedom from that aha moment, so I could show up feeling worthy because I was good enough and invite friendships, in a different way, that it wasn't ever about me. And I think that's just the common way we carry it.
Well, it is. It's so amazing how, that I don't even know that we're aware of how we interpret things as children, but that's a beautiful, perfect example of how you made an interpretation that really wasn't true at all, but it was how you perceived it as a child and how unconsciously it kept forward, like me with my late husband, and
That's right. That's
having that unrealistic expectation that he should be like him,
yeah.
when there were so many other wonderful things about him than that one little trait.
Yeah, and how we get threatened by the reenactment. And because it's not conscious, we are in reaction mode with some false belief about ourselves or the other person, right? So for
Yeah.
me, like carrying those wounds of, like, even if we just slice off that one part of the not good enoughness, like that drove so many of my decisions with friends and with lovers. And so, I repeated that, as many of us do, over many years until I was successful at pushing everybody away. And so it's that self-fulfilling prophecy that if I thought, well, my brothers don't want anything to do with me because I'm not good enough, I ride the aggressive side of the wound and fight with everybody. I push everybody away. I'm alone again, right? And for many years, blamed everybody for that, right?
Right.
Until it got unbearable. So the premise of the book was June 28th, 2002, when my husband left. So I had been having health problems that had disrupted my career. I lost a pregnancy. And on that day, my ex-husband left with our 3-year-old daughter to go on what was usually our annual camping trip. And honestly, I stood on that driveway. It was hot. It was like I was alone. And I wasn't feeling well. It felt like I had lost everything in my life. But for me, that was my yellow paint moment. And at that point, I didn't even feel like I had a reason to go on. And my parents were coming the next day to paint a room in my house yellow. And when I went through it in my head of like what was going on and what was I going to do, and when I didn't give up, it was like, okay, nothing else can hurt me. And when I chose not to give up and started doing some much clearer soul searching about how did I get to this place where I'm smart, I'm successful, I'm friendly, I'm knowledgeable, I'm insightful, why was I alone? And I can almost see it, honestly, as if it was yesterday, standing on that driveway. So that's how the book starts, because it invites all of us to think about what we're repeating that's working so much against us, that we're so hurt by. And most of us will reach that rock bottom moment. And so the idea that, yes, I don't know what would have happened if they weren't going to show up to paint, but I'd like to think that if I didn't wake up then, I would have woken up, soon thereafter, because that changed the whole direction. And that's what I invite my clients to once we trace the patterns. And the yellow paint book is just not a memoir of my yellow paint, but has some like deep questions to ask the readers of themselves. And that's how we do it.
That's beautiful. And I love this conversation because, you know, like you said, you were very successful in business and your career and on the outside and friendly, but yet there was that saboteur, there was that pattern that was playing havoc with your life. And we can't see it sometimes, or most times, I would say, until something
Yeah,
happens. Yeah.
right. And the pain is literally in our face. And the thought of me being alone again, and like honestly, it could have been a film, right? It would have been all those frames that like popped up. Like it's like, there I am, my brothers aren't playing with me. There are my friends going on. There I am getting sick. There I am, like losing my job because I'm too sick. I'm like, I'm losing everything. Like, how much more, right, did I have to lose before I woke up? And some people never wake up, and it's
Mhm,
tragic, right? But most of us like to think that we can be in a position to say, okay, I can't keep doing this. Like, what is going on? So that, I was already doing therapy at that point, and I was already had that kind of bolder personality where it was a more direct approach with clients. But then when I did my own work, it just, piggybacked on the work I was doing. And then honestly, it was through this book and through editing the book where we shared the therapy methods. The editors and the proofreaders and my publisher was like, accountable therapy. That's what people want to hear about. So when we launched the book in Los Angeles, and I took it down there, this is what people started hearing more and more about. And that's when we got the idea to trademark the term. One of the actors said, "This is like interrupting with love." And I'm like, that's exactly it. Because I said, I don't tell people what they want to hear, I tell people what they need to hear, always from a loving place. But it's like, if you're hiring me to make a difference in your life, then I owe it to you to find a way to show you how you're getting in your own way and where this is all coming from and what to do about that. And this is where we're at.
that's so beautiful. Well, if people really resonate with your message and everything, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. So we are at KarenRSW.com. That's our KG and Associates site. And the book website, the yellow paint website, is KarenGoslinSpeaks.com. And that will give them all the information about the background of the book, where to purchase the book on Amazon, either in the States or in Canada, worldwide Kindle versions. And we have an e-therapy program coming by the end of the year with a workbook. And I'm going to be working with a voice coach over the summer to release the audio book.
Oh,
So
nice.
I'm going to tell my own story that way. And we're going back down to Los Angeles at the Emmys to release the audio version.
Oh, how fun. How exciting. Well, just to let the audience know that if you really want to connect with Karen, we'll put her links above this interview and down in the comments. And, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom and your journey with us. So before we go today, is there any parting words of wisdom you'd like to share?
Oh, that's great. Thank you for having me. I would just give a message of hope that we are no different from each other. That if we find that we're hurting ourselves or hurting others or underachieving or being hurt in our lives, that we are no different. We are imperfect as humans. It's very easy to get in our own way. So, as you said, understanding that is half the battle. But the other half that is so critically important is to have either a form of therapy or a journey of some kind that shines a light on all of that so that you know specifically what you're trying to do differently to get closer to what you really want in your life.
And I highly suggest, really reach out to Karen or someone who resonates with you because so many of us took the solo journey and that can be really difficult and hard. And when you have people who have been there, like Karen has, and go on this journey with you and knows the pitfalls that you might encounter along the way that can help you through them, I think that's really powerful.
Thank you. Great summary.
Well, thank you for being here today, Karen, and we look forward to seeing more of you.
Great. Thanks again.